Starting a new video game can be an exciting time. Whether you're being introduced to a new world, reconnecting with a familiar cast of characters, or trying a new style of game altogether, this introduction can have a huge impact on your overall experience. With this, though, there is often a learning curve of some sort. This can be adjusting the sensitivity, remapping controller inputs or keybinds, or adjusting to a new graphic style altogether. Chief among these adjustments is by far mastering the camera. This feature of a game is simultaneously one of the most important features of a game, as well as being one of the chief reasons why a game is successful or not, with a variety of different player types. In some cases, the camera angle is a defining feature of a game or the game's genre, like in side-scrollers, fighting games, or first-person shooters. Depending on the game, the way you maneuver the camera can provide a competitive edge, allow for unique mechanics, or help develop a sense of immersion that strengthens the storytelling. More on that later. Recently, my wife and I started replaying It Takes Two. She isn't a huge video game person to begin with, but of the games that I've convinced her to play with me, this one managed to stick, and we're working through our second playthrough. Being that she isn't much of a gamer, one of the most consistent things we run into when playing together is her frustration with the various controls and inputs that It Takes Two demands of her. Namely, having to position her character in 3D space using one joystick, while having to navigate parkour areas, press specific buttons in a timely manner, and avoid the various things that are trying to kill her. It was during this playthrough that I started to realize just how integral mastery of the camera is to the overall experience of a game for its player, and it made me want to dive deeper into what I feel is an often underappreciated area of game design. It Takes Two contains some great examples of the way that manipulating the camera angle or the way that the camera is controlled can totally change how the game is experienced. For those who may be unfamiliar with It Takes Two, it's a co-op game featuring Cody and May, two members of a failing marriage who have been turned into dolls by a magical book and a daughter who doesn't want her parents to give up on their relationship. It also won Game of the Year in 2021, and it's totally worth a playthrough if you haven't had a chance to try it. The majority of the game takes place in split screen mode, but adjusts throughout the game to meet the needs of the task at hand. Early on in the game, you're challenged by a clan of squirrels that are living in the tree outside of your house, and your last showdown with their leader is presented in the same style of fighting games like Street Fighter or Injustice. Later on, the characters adorn armor and magical weapons, and the game suddenly feels like a roguelite like Hades. In both of these cases, the core art style, music, and characters stayed the same, but changing the viewer's perception of the scene through the camera was enough for someone like me with experience in these different genres to appreciate the nod to other styles of games. I grew up playing video games. As such, it's hard for me to remember exactly what it feels like to not have an innate sense of how to orient myself in these digital worlds. In the last year, some of the games I've played the most are Minecraft, Diablo 4, Baldur's Gate 3, and Valorant. Each of these games has a unique camera system from each other, and I've been able to transition between them without really any adjustment period, often within the same 2 to 3 hour stretch of gaming. But for someone like my wife who doesn't speak the language of video games, the idea of switching between games like this can create feelings of anxiety and frustration, and you can start to understand how someone without that context might not want to try to play a game to begin with. In researching for this video, and in an attempt to better empathize with that feeling of not knowing how to orient myself in a video game, I decided to replay through some of my favorite titles from my childhood and see what I notice when specifically looking at how the camera affects the experience of the video game. A few different titles caught my attention, the first being Kingdom Hearts. This is a franchise that I will always have a soft spot for. A lot of my early memories with video games involve my brother and I exploring the world of Kingdom Hearts, facing Disney villains and teaming up with Final Fantasy characters we didn't even know the names of. So you can imagine my surprise when after the first hour or so of replaying Kingdom Hearts 1, I found myself immensely frustrated by the unresponsive and rudimentary experience of Kingdom Hearts' camera system. Similar to games like Dark Souls or Zelda, Kingdom Hearts features a lock-on system that allows the character to focus on a single target and direct things like movement and ranged attacks. This system, typically featured in third-person games, can help the user overcome some of the awkwardness that comes from navigating a 3D world, especially one that is now over 20 years old. Needless to say, the system has improved a lot in the last few decades. When playing through the original Kingdom Hearts, my attacks felt sluggish, awkward, and misplaced. The lock-on system struggled to keep up with characters who would jump around the playable area. Fighting groups of enemies was difficult, and I found myself wondering how I ever lived with this kind of user experience in the past. As time went on, I did start to become more familiar with the game, but I can't say it was a super fun experience. I can definitely see how someone without the rose-colored glasses of nostalgia would become frustrated with the system and lose the motivation to learn this new skill. Another game that I ended up revisiting in researching for this video was Skyrim. In contrast to Kingdom Hearts, I found Skyrim to be a breath of fresh, cold Nordic air. Skyrim is an interesting game in that it allows for both third-person and third-person gameplay, with fairly seamless and integrated transitions between the two. Something I found interesting is that for some events in the game, like talking to an NPC or absorbing a dragon's soul, the character is left in first person, and this can make the experience feel more natural and cinematic than it might feel if you were in the third person. In replaying Skyrim, I did notice one thing that I never really thought of before this video. Outside of some third-person kill cams and some mods that are available, Skyrim is completely devoid of cutscenes. Whether you're entering a new city for the first time, being confronted by a bandit, or you're killing Alduin and completing the game's main storyline, all of this can be experienced in the first person. This is an interesting decision on Bethesda's part, and something I never really thought about before. This was especially jarring coming from a game like Baldur's Gate 3, where despite having a similar setting to Skyrim, every interaction with an NPC or a pivotal moment in the storyline is greeted with a cutscene or a change in camera angle of some sort. However, I do feel that this decision is one of Skyrim's secret strengths, and part of why the game has such an emotional hold on its fanbase, more than a decade after its initial release. When something cool happens to the main character in Skyrim, it feels like it's happening to the player. In other RPGs, you might be playing the pre-created main character, like in the Horizon series, where it's more of an interactive movie. In Skyrim, however, the game keeps you at the center of the action the entire time, and lends itself to a deeper sense of immersion that allows you to connect with the story in a way that other games can't seem to match. This isn't to say there isn't a time and place for these kinds of cutscenes. Despite the criticism leveled at Diablo 4's first few seasons, I have very little negative things to say about the campaign, and that was ripe with cutscenes and cinematic moments that highlighted and emphasized the emotion and the weight of what was happening. But Skyrim's minimalism in this area creates the opportunity for a level of immersion that other games must sacrifice for the sake of the cutscene. This immersion is, I believe, at least a part of why Bethesda was able to capture the hearts of so many players and convince us to purchase the same game across multiple generations of consoles and sink hundreds upon hundreds of hours into different playstyles and characters. I could, and likely will in the future, make an entire video on everything that makes Skyrim so special. But for now, I'll just say that the camera mechanics of the game allow the gamer to experience the other unique and special aspects of the game in a way that a different camera mechanic or decision might have lost. Going back to the mechanics of cameras, I think it's clear that how a game decides to have its players experience the world of the game can have a lasting impact on the way the game is perceived, both consciously and unconsciously. Games like Uncharted or The Last of Us have cinematography, scores, and performances that can blur the line between a video game and a movie. Some games like God of War Ragnarok or The Witcher 3 have even started implementing difficulty settings that are based around how closely you want the game to resemble the experience of a movie. This new standard of AAA titles to blend the lines between gameplay and cutscene adds an interesting twist to the discussion around how a camera should or could be used in a video game and the way the video games are quote unquote meant to be experienced. Thank you for watching. Making this video has been super informative for me, and it's been interesting to see my perspective on games I've known for years shift as I pay attention to details that before I never really paid much attention to. If this kind of content was interesting to you, feel free to subscribe. I hope to be able to make more of these kinds of videos in the future. Have a great day. See you in the next video.